The Play Absolutely podcast with Dr. Sue Jennings and Dr. Andy Hickson.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Play Absolutely podcast. Hello, Sue. How you doing?
I'm doing okay, Andy. And yourself?
Yeah. It's been a good week. It's been a very wet week, and I think it's been very wet and rainy across the UK. So not just where I'm living at the moment. But how has play been for you this week? Anything come up for you as regards play?
Oh, all sorts of things. Obviously, a lot to do with stories and how to be playful when telling the stories.
Okay.
And I think it's all very well saying, oh, well, everyone knows how to tell stories. Well, everyone doesn't know how to tell stories. I mean, we can all remember teachers from school who sounded as if they were reading from a telephone directory. So I think there's all sorts of things we can do to introduce the playful element. And of course, it's a lot to do with how people understand using their voices.
Well, I remember when I was a young boy, and I think I was doing my first babysitting job, so I was trying to earn a bit of extra money, and I think it was a friend of yours. I went round to babysit. They had a young girl, and her parents went out, and then the girl said, "Can you read me a bedtime story?" And I was like, "Okay." So she chose a book, and I was reading a bedtime story. And at the end, she said, "You're not very good at this, are you?" I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "You're not very good at telling stories, are you?" I was like, "Oh, sorry. I did my best. I haven't done it before." Yeah. Yeah, so that was my sort of thrown into the deep end. I think I've come a long way since then, but yes, it's a skill, isn't it? So it's something you learn how to communicate, how to be able to tell a story.
Yes, and it's partly how you use your voice, but it's also how you use the timing.
Hmm.
You slow something down because there's going to be a surprise, and then, or you speed it up very quickly, or you do it more quietly. And I think once people realize that just by varying their voice, they can command the attention of people listening to stories, we need to be playful ourselves with the way we tell a story.
Can you recommend to our viewers, if you can't, don't worry, we'll do some research and bring it to the next pod, but off the top of your head, can you recommend maybe 2 or 3 storytellers that our viewers could sort of search out online to get an understanding of a good storyteller?
Mm. Well, the first one that comes to mind who tells stories both on television and also live and teaches storytelling courses is Sharon Jaxtis.
Okay.
It was quite interesting because Sharon started off being trained as a drama therapist,
Right.
but then found that she felt more comfortable telling therapeutic stories. And she's developed that whole area now. And her partner is a musician. So they combine together and have accompaniment to the stories. And I've seen her tell stories in every sort of environment. In churchyards, in halls, in schools, indoors and outdoors, combining it with dance and movement and music and percussion. So quite extraordinary, the whole range of storytelling that she's actually developed now. And I've only once ever seen her thrown in a storytelling session. And she and I still laugh about it, although must have been 20 years ago. And this was at the local museum in Glastonbury.
Okay.
And she was telling a local story. And the last line was, "And do you think the prince and the girl were happy ever after? And the 5-year-old in the front row shook her head and said, no, they weren't. And the whole audience collapsed laughing. It was so funny. What was meant to be a rhetorical question, and this 5-year-old answered it straight away. So you can never tell the response when you're storytelling.
I suppose you've got to be prepared for a variety of different responses. Now, you've, of course, have travelled a lot, worked in many different countries. So I'm sure you've experienced stories from many different countries immediately that come to mind. I'm sure I've heard you talk about stories in Romania, stories in India, in Malaysia with the orang asli, of course, the Temia, and I'm sure there's a whole variety of others. Which country or which language or which culture are amongst your favourite stories, and why?
That's a good question. I must say, because of the basis in mythology, I do like a lot of the Greek stories. I mean, they raise all
Greeks, modern Greek?
both, but I personally, I prefer to stay with ancient Greece. And I was doing some work recently comparing the ancient Sumerian stories, which are the oldest stories we know about, with some of the Greek stories, and all these themes around journey to the underworld, which of course is very much about a journey into our own shadow, of actually coming to terms with the darkness in ourselves. So thinking about the story of Demeter and Persephone,
Okay.
and how Persephone is kidnapped by Hades and is taken to the underworld, which again is the journey into the darkness. And what I find interesting, particularly with the Greek stories, that there are various versions of them that have got passed down over time. I mean, there's one very interesting one about Demeter. I don't know if you've heard it before, of when a demigod called Biba visited her and Demeter was absolutely heartbroken when she lost Persephone, and she was the goddess of the fertility and the flowers and the fruit, and everything began to die away. And Zeus himself, the king of the gods, tried to encourage her to go back, and her grief was all very well, but look at the devastation around you. But Demeter would not be consoled. But then this demi-goddess went to see her, called Biba, and started to dance for her to try and cheer her up.
Okay.
And she danced, but it didn't do much. So in the end, Biba lifted up her skirts, and she wasn't wearing any knickers. And apparently, that made Demeter laugh at last. It's a rather funny variation on the Demeter and Persephone story. And obviously, for certain age...
Not really a children's story then.
Exactly. You have to choose your audience to tell that one too. But sometimes I found with adults, because it's got this funny edge to it, it makes them laugh and they think about it. And a very interesting example in one of my groups, a psychiatrist, when she heard the story, was amazed by it and insisted on playing the role of Biba. So I did point out to the group that all these actions were symbolic.
Fabulous.
So, yes, those type of journey stories, the stories of Theseus and the Minotaur, and which is a fascinating story, and has lots of symbolic challenges in it to do with love and life and death and loss. So those I enjoy. Many of the Romanian stories I enjoy, but because they have twists at the end and often leave the end open, you have to be careful.
Make up your own ending kind of thing.
Yes. And some people get quite anxious about that. And maybe I could give an example of one of those stories. Should I do that now?
Yeah, sure.
And this is a story about a shepherd boy who lived with his family at the edge of a very big forest. And he knew that on the 16th of January every year, St. Peter would come to a glade in the forest, and all the wolves of Romania would come to see him. And St. Peter would allot what animals they were allowed to eat for the coming year. And he was very keen to find out whether or not his father might lose any of his sheep to the wolves. So he decided to go to the beech forest. And there's all the detail of his sheepskin coat and his boots and trudging through the snow and the crackle of the ground underneath in the forest. And he found a tree to climb up and hide to watch what was going to happen. And he got very, very cold, very cold. He thought nothing was going to happen. And suddenly he heard all the snuffles and grunts and growls of the wolves and looked through the branches, and there were hundreds of wolves, all converging on the forest, waiting for St. Peter. And St. Peter eventually arrived, and all the wolves bowed very respectfully to him. And he went through every single one, or families, or lone wolves, or pairs, and 2 or 3 rabbits here, and a sheep there, and an ox there, and so on. And slowly, all the wolves thanked Peter for their gift that they could eat during the coming year, and went away back home. And Mihai, the boy, was feeling very happy that St. Peter hadn't given any of his father's sheep away. And St. Peter was just sort of packing up, getting ready to go away, and a very, very old lame wolf was crawling over the landscape and arrived. And the old wolf said to St. Peter, "I'm late because I'm old and I'm lame, but have you saved something for me?" And St. Peter looked around and shook his head, and he said, "Well, I've given all the creatures away, but there is a little shepherd boy hiding up that tree over there." And then that is the end of the story.
Oh, no.
Now, I was working with a group of homeless people in Romania, people who were sleeping on the railway station and in abandoned cars and so on. And one of them, when I told the story, came up to me afterwards and sort of grabbed my sleeve and said, "Sue, the wolf doesn't eat Mihai, does he?" So I said, "Well, Costas, you're making up the ending yourself. It can be whatever ending you want." He said, "No, but you must tell me the wolf didn't eat him, did he?" And he got very, very anxious. And I had to sort of do a lot of calming, and we did a breathing exercise. I said, "You make up your own ending, and your ending doesn't have to be that the wolf ate Mihai." What would
Well, my ending from that is that the boy jumped down from the tree and said, "Oh, I feel so sorry for you." And St. Peter was really kind not to give away any of my father's sheep because we need them so much. But I'm going to donate 2 of my father's sheep to you so that you can feed yourself and your family and be happy. The end.
Well, I'll quickly tell you the endings that this particular group made up. One group decided that Mihai was very clever and played a trick on the wolf with his sheepskin coat. So he dropped the coat so the wolf would think it was a sheep, which meant that he could run home to safety.
Okay.
Another of the group said that Mihai was so sorry for the lame wolf that he said that he mustn't attack him because he was going to take him home to his father, and his father would take him to the wolf hospital to make sure that his leg would get better. And another group said that Mihai said to the wolf, "Can we be friends?" And the wolf said yes. So Mihai took him home and explained to his father, and the wolf became Mihai's pet. I thought that those sort of, one was a trick, but the other two were very caring, thoughtful examples.
Mm.
I mean, this was a big group. What were 3 or 4 groups, and there were sort of 5 in a group. So they're between 20 and 30. Late teenagers, young adults who were homeless, working with that story. So that's something you find with so many of the folk stories from Romania, that they have this open ending. And then people discuss and debate what the answer might be. So,
Well, of course, when we grew up, we're taught that stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end, but not all stories have that. I mean, that's one example you've given. There are many stories that won't start at the beginning, so to speak, or won't have a beginning, and there's lots of different ways to tell a story, which is great. Yeah, spice of life. Okay, we can come back to stories, but let's start this new thing that we're doing, which is play stories in the news. And I brought 2 stories. I think we decided that 2 stories, one from the UK, one from abroad, is enough. So this is this week's Play in the News. So, 2 stories for you today. One from the UK and one from abroad. In the UK, we have a story from Greenwich in London with the headline, Transforming Youth Play. Starts off positive. This story is it's from Greenwich Borough Council website, and a decision from their cabinet about reducing, or in some cases removing, adult supervision in children's play spaces, such as adventure playgrounds. It's called Transforming Youth Play. But the likely reality is a shift in adult presence, supervision, and access in some spaces, which changes what play is possible and who feels safe using it. Of course, removing staff doesn't remove need. It can move into corridors, to streets, or online spaces where the play label can mask conflict escalation. So when a council says it's transforming play but reduces adult support in play spaces, the risk doesn't vanish, it relocates. So when I read this, they don't. But I'll finish what I've prepared here. And so the key question for me is, what alternative staff provision is being offered, and where will young people actually go instead? So no, there is no. There's nothing else being offered. It is literally reducing the supervision and guidance at play spaces, which of course is going to make a lot of young people feel unsafe. I remember when I was 10 or 11 in an adventure playground in London, I was badly beaten up and mugged and my bicycle was stolen. Some kind of guidance, some kind of supervision in a lot of these play spaces is something that young people actually want. So we'll talk about that more in a minute. But let's have this story from abroad. And we visit Malaysia, one of our favourite places, and a story from the Centre for Orang Asli Concerns, or COAC, as it's also known. So for Orang Asli communities, play space is often what we might call downstream of land security and safe infrastructure. So it's good to find positive stories too. Now, COAC have the headline on their website, Education for the Orang Asli, the Community Way. In a Semai village, so a Semai is one of the 18 indigenous groups of Orang Asli in Malaysia, in a Semai village, in a village called Tual near Raub in Pahang, a community design learning centre frames children's development through culturally familiar modes, including drawing and community gathering practices. Instead of treating school readiness as only classroom compliance, it's play-friendly. It's a play-friendly approach because it's rooted in identity, safety, and local ways of learning by doing. Amazing stuff. And that concludes this week's Play in the News. Do you want to make any comments on it?
Well, the one that immediately grabs my attention is the one with the Orang Asli, because that's really forward-thinking, that they can actually use play within a person's culture to focus on education. And I just think that is great news.
Well, it is. I absolutely agree with you there. I think it is great news, and it is moving forward because, as we both know, a lot of Orang Asli education has, up until recently, and I mean still now, it's been taught sort of, they're being removed from their culture. So their teachers have been non-Orang Asli. They've been taught in a language which isn't their original language. And, a lot of their history, customs, customary practices and so on are sort of, they're not talked about, they're not shared. So bringing in ways that complement and celebrate their own history, their own customary practices, and using playful ways to teach those. And most of all, using teachers that actually come from the culture, the Orang Asli villages themselves, I think is a huge leap forward and is something to be celebrated and supported. Absolutely.
I mean, do you remember that example that I witnessed of the Negrito boy who was found wandering in the countryside and was taken to a psychiatric hospital? And he was seen by a Filipino psychiatrist, not even Malay. And she thought that he was severely retarded. I mean, horrendous description of how she viewed him. And
just sorry to interrupt you. So you just adjusted your mic. It's gone up a little bit.
Sorry.
Getting the breeze. If you just put the mic down.
Sorry.
That's better. Yeah.
Okay.
It's good.
But it was your little brother, who at the time was only 8, who took a pack of playing cards out of his pocket and sat with this Orang Asli boy from the Negrito group. And the boy lit up and realised that he and Hal knew a card game together.
Okay.
And they just quietly played this sort of matching cards game. And the psychiatrist said, "Oh, he can talk then." So I said, "Yes, he is talking his own language." And my son happens to know it, because Hal responded with Temia language. The boy was talking Negrito, but more or less they understood each other.
Right.
And that simple act of Hal playing with this boy, because that's what it was, playing cards, actually stopped the psychiatrist giving him electric shock treatment, which was a horrendous idea. I mean, the boy was 10.
Of course, electric shock treatment in the UK, I mean, as they were doing electric shock treatment, and even sort of things like lobotomies and so on, right up into the late 70s, weren't they? Before that was, yeah. So
But
I could have been a product of that. You didn't give me a lobotomy, no. Oh, there's no scar there. Okay.
You don't normally give it to children anyway.
Right.
And certainly children you don't understand or know about.
It wasn't in the beginning. It was supposed to be a miraculous cure, sort of one. Oof. Anyway, the first story was about sort of having adult supervision in children's play spaces partly to make them safe. And I don't know if it's related or a different kind of supervision, but I know one of the things that you wanted to talk about was play and supervision. So that's this segue into this. What did you want to talk about in terms of play and supervision?
Supervision is a word that encompasses so many different things. And certainly in the playground space, supervision is to do with health and safety and making sure that the children stay safe even though they're having adventures. I mean, it's a bit of a contradiction in terms, but some children will want to try and go to very extreme modes of playing in those spaces. Supervision's necessary. But the work that I'm doing at the moment is the sort of supervision that's required if you practice any therapeutic mode with other people who are vulnerable.
Okay.
So all therapists of all sorts, whether they're psychotherapists, art, music, drama, dance therapists, play therapists, are required to have supervision to make sure that they stay objective enough about their practice and that their practice is safe.
For viewers that aren't aware of exactly what supervision is, do you want to give a brief outline for them of what supervision entails?
I mean, you can have supervision as an individual or supervision in a group of 3 or 4 practitioners, and you bring your practice, present it to the group or to the individual therapist who is outside of all this, so can be very objective, could encourage you to reflect on what you're doing and whether it was the best option of what activity you did and so on. And it's particularly important when people are newly qualified that they have supervision. But I mean, I have supervision even at my grand old age. Every month I see my supervisor about practice to make sure I'm staying objective enough and not over-identifying with the situation. That's what supervision is all about. Now, if somebody is an art or drama, music or dance or play therapist, I think it's not appropriate to just have verbal supervision.
Right.
So that's where the playfulness comes in. That, people get into their heads and want to tell me something, and I'll say, show me with those small objects, what's actually going on in this therapeutic work. And even the act of just showing me using the sand tray, using small objects, using a drawing, highlights actually what their struggles are. So it's very important when you use action in your therapeutic work that there's also action in your supervision. And that's what I train people in. What can we bring into this situation? There's an activity that helps us understand the dynamics more than if I just talked about it.
Can I interject here and just ask, what then, again, for our viewers, what is the main difference or differences between having a supervisor and having a therapist?
A supervisor is keeping a view of the whole of the landscape, of the client, the therapist, and whatever activity they're doing. Whereas a therapist is purely acknowledging the client in the work they're doing. So if I'm supervising somebody's work, it's that dynamic that's going on between the therapist and the client, child or adult, that I'm helping people to understand.
So you're not like an employer in the sense that as a supervisor, you can't be telling the person what they should or shouldn't be doing, but you can just be offering suggestions, can you?
The main thing I'm doing is helping the therapist explore their professional practice. So, for example, there might be a time when a struggle that the client has is actually quite close to the therapist's own experience. And they might respond or think about responding at a personal level rather than at a professional level. Well, being outside it all, I'm more likely to see this.
So would you call that professional detachment?
Yes, that's a good word for it. And we have something we call parallel process. And that's fascinating when it happens because the supervisee's relationship with the supervisor is often a mirror of the client's relationship with the therapist.
Mm.
And I can give you an example of that just recently when
No names.
no names and no geographical regions. But the therapist brought to supervision the fact that more often than not, her client was late for her sessions with her and didn't know what to do about it. And could the supervisor help her understand it? What she failed to recognize was for the last 2 or 3 sessions, she had been late for her supervision. So, I mean, a very simple but explicit example of parallel process.
Mm.
So by reflecting on her being late for supervision, she was able to understand her client being late for therapy.
Interesting.
Supervision is a fascinating process. I love doing it, both individuals and groups.
A funny story about professional detachment. When I was, you might remember this because I know you helped me, I think, design a questionnaire when I was 15. So yeah, I was doing a little project about death actually, and I interviewed funeral parlor workers, nurses, doctors, and a variety of other people. And one of the questions was, what does the term professional detachment mean to you? Actually, that's the only question I can remember, probably because of this story. And there was the local hospital, the doctors, a selection of doctors and nurses had filled out the form. One of the forms came back. Now, bear in mind, this was filled in by, a senior nurse, I believe it was. What does the term professional detachment mean to you? And this person had written, oh, that's something to do when the soul leaves the body. Yeah, even as a 15, 16-year-old made me smile.
And yes, that was very interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, you've moved your mic again. It just means that the volume is going to be up and down, but yeah, we'll cope with it, I'm sure. Okay. Any other things to do with play and supervision that you want to mention?
Yes. I mean, one thing that I think is always very interesting, that there's sort of various myths about supervision. So, for example, sometimes supervisees think they can only bring their successes to supervision, when that's the very thing not to bring. What they need to bring are what they're struggling with, what they feel lost about, things that make them feel uncomfortable. That's what the supervisor's there for.
Guide,
And
really, isn't it?
yes, so you have to reassure people a lot that If they only bring the things that have gone well, I would be very suspicious, because nobody gets it right all the time. Otherwise, we wouldn't need supervision. So I think that aspect is very important. And because with neurodramatic play, the practice that people are doing is a little bit different from ordinary play therapy, we do need supervisors that have been trained in neurodramatic play, which is what we're doing at the moment. And a very interesting exercise, a new exercise I thought of for this course, was everybody in the group had to have a large piece of fabric. And to start with, they had to dance around with this fabric. Wave it up and shake it and wrap it round them and uncurl and everything they could think of to dance with this big piece of fabric. Then I asked them to get a piece of paper and to draw on the paper the movement with the fabric. And that was absolutely fascinating. I mean, it's... Well, I told them to just be spontaneous, not to think about it. It's not a logical thing. Just carry on dancing on the paper. And then they looked at what was the relationship between that and their therapeutic group they were running. And it immediately was relevant for them. It was quite extraordinary that they were carrying this dynamic from their therapy work into their movement with the fabric and then into the drawing on the paper.
Wow. So talking of therapy work and neurodramatic play and so on, I believe in about 10 days' time, you are holding, is it the second or third neurodramatic play conference in Dublin, is it?
In Dublin, yes.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds pretty amazing.
It could be very exciting because...
Why Dublin? Why?
Every time I run a training course in neurodramatic play, at least 50% of the students are from Ireland. It seems to particularly appeal to the Irish way of working with children in particular. But what this conference is doing is demonstrating that neurodramatic play applies right across the age group, from babies through to older people. And Clive, who joined us a few weeks ago, he's going to do a workshop on using neurodramatic play with people with dementia. So that's going to be very new for a lot of people.
Are there any spaces left? I mean, if people wanted at the last minute to join, is there a possibility of them to do so?
Right now, there are a handful of spaces.
Okay, and how do they join?
And it's on Eventbrite, or they look at my website,
which is www.ndpltd.org.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's very easy either way to join up.
So they're looking for NDP conference in Dublin, and have you got the date to mind?
It's on the 7th of March.
7th of March.
All day.
It's a one-day event, yeah?
Yes, it's a one-day conference.
Fabulous. Okay.
And it's very much doing body-focused work, how trauma is located in the body, and how you can discover your authentic body self.
Well, we'll add a link in the description if people want to go. Bear in mind, it's only 10 days, so yeah, get moving if you want one of those last couple of places. Okay, fabulous.
That's great.
So, yeah. Okay, so I think we're drawing to the end of this pod. Any last minute funny play things that you've heard this week that you'd like to mention?
Well, it still goes on happening. You think it's all going swimmingly and people understand the play and the parents are going to let the children play. And then an example just at the end of last week of parents who'd come to see me about, they've got some worries about the child not sleeping, and we talked about play, and possibly there might be some anxieties that needed to be played out, and so on and so on. But it was the aftermath of that that was interesting, because when I saw them again, I said, well, how is it going? And the dad said, well, we did what you said. And I told him, this was a child of 4, I told him exactly how to play so he'd go to sleep. I thought, I can't win here, because the one thing I had said was not to tell the child how to play, but to have a few things there and allow him to play. But it was quite interesting, this idea of free play was such a difficult one for the parents to hear. And
Yes. Well,
which is why I think the training courses should include parents, so that parents feel it in their bones.
So what sort of jumped out to me when you first started talking about that segment is letting the children play was the part of the sentence you used. And suddenly, for some reason, what popped into my head was a song or an album that you used to play when we were children by Cat Stevens, formerly known as Cat Stevens. I think his name's Yusuf Islam. I think that's what he changed his name. He converted to Islam. He's a Muslim now, of course. But yeah, so one of his lyrics was, "The children play." So I can't remember the name of the song, but yeah, that popped in. So even then, there were, I mean, that was from the 60s, I think, 1960s. That's going back a lot of years. They were still struggling with the constraints on children's play. Yeah. Keeps on going. And where are they supposed to go? Getting back to that story from Greenwich, also, I mean, I remember two specific, I worked, I'm going to name them. I remember I did a lot of work in the past with the London Borough of Lewisham. I also did a lot of work with the outside of London with the North Somerset council there, and one of the things they both had in common was they almost wiped out the sort of youth club provision in the borough or in the area, and then they were wondering why sort of crime was going up. Children were moaning that there wasn't anywhere for them to play. Well, you cut the youth provision for them. Keeps on going, trying to save money, like you were talking about in one of the episodes before. Sort of schools selling off spaces. Same as councils selling off spaces, and it's mostly, sort of young people's provision, which has been cut, and then they worry about, why there's, an increase in youth crime and so on and so on. It's, yeah.
A lot of food for thought.
That is a lot of food for thought. But let's go back to our positive and the way we positively like to end our podcasts. If anybody's feeling the blues, if they're feeling under the weather, or they just want to a little change of focus for the day, some playful activity that they might be able to do either themselves or with friends or colleagues. What have you got for our viewers today? So,
well, I was thinking we really needed something a bit more positive to think about because of all the rain.
Yeah.
Everything in sight is wet. And I immediately made the association with Incy Wincy Spider.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yes, and of course you can actually do. So it's like a lovely little action song, and it breaks through the misery once you activate. Incy Wincy Spider climbed up the water spout, down came the rain and washboards, Out came the sun and dried up the rain. Incy Wincy Spider climbed up the pipe again. And I thought, that just fits right now, because everything gets washed out like Incy. So let's turn it into a game.
Let's turn it into the game. And sort of makes me think, there must be a lot of people doing rain dances at the moment with so much rain. Well, my activity is kind of related to something we were talking about last podcast in terms of breath and breathing. We looked at tongue twisters, of course. But this short game, not a game really, an activity called bee breath. Bee breath, so buzzing breath, and really, really simple. Something you can do on your own while you're driving. You can be doing something else and do this. It's particularly good if you're feeling anxious, and it can sort of reduce your anxiousness levels. Bee breath is taking in a breath, the count of 3 into your tummy, and then releasing it out on a hum. Try different pitches of the hum, see how long you can make the hum, and feel the vibrations in different parts of your body. So in your chest, in your cheeks, in your throat, and so on. Bee breath. And you can do it for just a few minutes, or you can do it for sort of 10, 20 minutes as well. And it really does just help. I mean, all these breathing things just helps relax you. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So until next time, I suppose. Please, viewers, if you've liked this episode, please, show us by giving a like, leaving a comment, and please subscribe to the channel. That really helps the algorithm and gets our podcast out to a few more people, which is brilliant for everyone concerned. So I will just end by saying, don't forget to play.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Bye for now.
Bye.